Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across his property. The barn stood silent against the fading light, its weathered wood groaning softly in the autumn breeze. He had lived on this land for 15 years, working the soil and raising livestock, and he thought he knew every inch of it. But today, something caught his eye that made his breath catch in his throat. Behind the barn, where the grass grew wild and untamed, a series of prints marked the soft earth. Marcus crouched down, his knees cracking with the movement. These weren't animal tracks. They were footprints, perfectly formed and unmistakable, but impossibly small. Each one measured no more than 3 inches long, with 5 distinct toes and a clearly defined heel. They were fresh, pressed deep into the mud from last night's rain. His heart hammered against his ribs as he traced the path with his eyes. The prints led away from the barn, toward the dense forest that bordered his property. Marcus had heard stories growing up, tales his grandmother used to tell about the old woods and the things that lived there. He had always dismissed them as folklore, superstition meant to keep children from wandering too far. But staring at these impossible tracks, doubt crept into his mind like frost creeping across a winter window. He stood slowly, his shadow stretching across the prints. The rational part of his brain searched for explanations. A child's toy, perhaps, or some elaborate prank by neighborhood kids. But the prints were too perfect, too natural. They showed weight distribution and movement patterns that no toy could replicate. Whoever or whatever made these tracks had walked on 2 feet, deliberately and with purpose. Marcus glanced back at his farmhouse, where smoke curled from the chimney. His wife Sarah would be starting dinner soon, expecting him to come in and wash up. He should tell her about this, show her what he found. But something held him back. A voice in his head, half curiosity and half warning, told him this was something he needed to investigate alone. The forest loomed ahead, ancient trees standing like silent sentinels guarding secrets they had kept for centuries. Marcus had hunted in those woods, knew the deer trails and clearings, but he had never ventured too deep. There was something about the heart of that forest that had always felt wrong, a heaviness in the air that made animals nervous and birds fall silent. He made his decision in an instant. Turning back to the barn, Marcus grabbed his heavy flashlight and checked his phone battery. 73%. Good enough. He also took his hunting knife, sliding it into the leather sheath on his belt. Not because he expected danger, he told himself, but because it was foolish to enter the woods unprepared. The first footprint at the forest's edge was already half hidden by fallen leaves. Marcus knelt again, brushing them aside carefully. The track pointed deeper into the woods, toward a narrow game trail he had never noticed before. The trees here grew closer together, their branches intertwining overhead to create a canopy that blocked most of the remaining daylight. Marcus took a deep breath and stepped forward. The forest seemed to swallow him whole, the sounds of his farm fading behind him as if he had crossed some invisible threshold. His footsteps crunched on the carpet of dead leaves, each sound seeming too loud in the unnatural quiet. Every few yards, he found another tiny footprint, each one leading him further from everything familiar and safe. The trail wound between massive oak trees and over moss-covered stones. Marcus checked his phone, marking his location so he could find his way back. The battery display now showed 68%, even though he had barely used it. Strange. He pushed the thought aside and continued forward, his eyes locked on the next print, and the next, drawing him deeper into the mystery that had begun behind his barn. The forest grew darker with each step Marcus took. The canopy above had thickened into an almost solid ceiling of branches and leaves, filtering the dying sunlight into pale, ghostly beams that barely touched the ground. He clicked on his flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom and catching particles of dust that danced in the still air. The tiny footprints continued their steady path, never wavering, never doubling back. Marcus had been walking for 20 minutes when he noticed the change. The trees here were different, older than anything he had seen before. Their trunks were massive, gnarled with age, and covered in strange patterns of bark that almost looked like faces frozen in silent screams. The air itself felt thicker, harder to breathe, and carried an earthy scent mixed with something sweet and rotting. He paused to check his phone again. 52% battery. That wasn't right. He had barely been using it, yet it was draining faster than it should. The GPS showed his location, but the map around it was blank, as if the satellite couldn't penetrate whatever hung over this part of the forest. A small icon in the corner indicated no signal. Marcus felt the first real twinge of fear curl in his stomach. The footprints led him to a clearing he never knew existed. In the center stood a circle of mushrooms, their caps bright red with white spots, growing in a perfect ring about 10 feet in diameter. Marcus had read about fairy rings, knew the old legends that warned against stepping inside them. His grandmother's voice echoed in his memory, stern and serious despite the fantastical nature of her words. Never step in a fairy ring, Marcus. Never eat their food, never accept their gifts, and never make a promise you cannot keep. But this was different. This was real, physical evidence of something he couldn't explain. The tiny footprints led directly to the mushroom circle, then seemed to vanish. Marcus circled the ring slowly, his flashlight beam sweeping across the ground. On the far side, he found them again, emerging from the circle and continuing toward a dense thicket of thorny bushes. His rational mind screamed at him to turn back, to go home to Sarah and the warmth of their house, to forget he had ever seen those prints behind the barn. But his feet kept moving forward. The mystery had its hooks in him now, pulling him onward with invisible strings he couldn't break. The thorny thicket looked impassable at first, a wall of twisted branches and sharp thorns that would shred anyone foolish enough to try pushing through. But as Marcus approached, he noticed a gap, a narrow tunnel that wound through the brambles. The tiny footprints led directly into it. He crouched down, shining his light into the passage. It was barely wide enough for him to crawl through on his hands and knees. Every instinct told him this was madness. He was a grown man, a farmer with responsibilities, crawling through thorns in a darkening forest chasing impossible footprints. But the pull was irresistible. Marcus got down on his hands and knees, his flashlight clenched between his teeth, and began to crawl. The thorns scraped against his jacket and caught on his jeans, but the tunnel was surprisingly clear inside, as if something regularly used this path. The earth beneath his hands was soft and damp, and he could see the tiny footprints pressed into it, leading him forward. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, twisting and turning until Marcus lost all sense of direction. Then suddenly, the tunnel opened up. Marcus emerged into another clearing, but this one was different from anything he had ever seen. The trees here glowed with a soft, phosphorescent light that emanated from the bark itself, casting everything in an eerie blue-green luminescence. Strange flowers bloomed in clusters, their petals translucent and filled with swirling colors that hurt to look at directly. The air hummed with a sound just below the threshold of hearing, a vibration that seemed to resonate in his bones. Marcus stood slowly, brushing dirt from his knees. His flashlight seemed almost unnecessary here, the natural light sufficient to see by. But when he clicked it off, he immediately felt more vulnerable, more exposed. He turned it back on, keeping the beam low. The footprints continued across this impossible clearing, and now Marcus could see other signs. Tiny structures made of twigs and leaves, no bigger than dollhouses, were scattered among the roots of the glowing trees. Small pathways, clearly worn by countless tiny feet, crisscrossed the clearing in an intricate network. This wasn't just a place something had passed through. This was a home. Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket, making him jump. He pulled it out, heart racing. The battery showed 21%, and the screen displayed a message that made his blood run cold. It was from Sarah, sent 10 minutes ago. "Where are you? It's getting dark." Starting to worry. But that was impossible. He had only been in the forest for 30 minutes at most. Marcus checked the time on his phone and felt the world tilt beneath his feet. The display showed 8:47 p.m. He had left the barn at 4:30 in the afternoon. Somehow, over 4 hours had passed. Panic seized Marcus's chest like an iron fist. He tried to call Sarah, but the phone showed no signal, just like before. His hands trembled as he typed out a text message, hoping it would send when he got back into range. "I'm okay. Lost track of time. Coming home now." The message sat there, unsent, mocking him with its failure to transmit. He needed to turn back, to retrace his steps through the thorn tunnel and out of this impossible place. But as Marcus turned to leave, movement caught his eye. At the far edge of the clearing, near the largest of the glowing trees, something stirred. He froze, his breath caught in his throat, his flashlight beam steady on the spot where he had seen the motion. For a long moment, nothing happened. The humming sound continued, the glowing trees pulsed gently with their otherworldly light, and Marcus stood like a statue, every muscle tensed. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from behind the tree. It was small, no more than a foot tall, with delicate features that seemed almost human but not quite. Its skin had a faint greenish tint in the strange light, and its eyes were too large, too dark, reflecting Marcus's flashlight beam like mirrors. It wore clothes made of leaves and flower petals, stitched together with threads that sparkled like spider silk. On its feet were tiny boots that matched the footprints Marcus had been following. The creature regarded him with an expression Marcus couldn't read. Fear? Curiosity? Anger? It tilted its head to one side, studying him with those enormous eyes, and Marcus realized he was holding his breath. He let it out slowly, trying not to make any sudden movements. More figures emerged from the shadows. Dozens of them, each unique but sharing that same otherworldly quality. Some had skin like bark, others like flower petals. Their hair ranged from moss green to sunset orange, flowing in a breeze Marcus couldn't feel. They formed a semicircle around him, keeping their distance but clearly blocking any easy retreat. The first creature, apparently their leader, stepped forward. When it spoke, its voice was like wind chimes and rustling leaves, forming words that Marcus understood but knew he shouldn't be able to comprehend. "You have walked the old paths," it said, each word carefully pronounced. "You have crossed the threshold without invitation. You have entered our sanctuary." Marcus found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "I didn't mean to intrude. I was following the footprints. I just wanted to know what made them." The creature's expression shifted, something that might have been amusement crossing its strange features. Curiosity. How very human. How very dangerous. It gestured to the others, and they began to move closer, forming a tighter circle around Marcus. "Do you know where you are, human farmer? Do you understand what you have found?" Marcus shook his head, not trusting himself to speak. His heart was hammering so hard he was sure they could hear it. "This is the between," the creature continued, spreading its tiny arms wide. "The place where your world and ours touch. The threshold that most humans have forgotten how to see. Your ancestors knew of it, feared it, respected it. They left offerings at the forest's edge and never ventured past the old markers. But you have forgotten, and in forgetting, you have trespassed." The other creatures began to speak among themselves in their musical language, their voices overlapping in a harmony that was both beautiful and unsettling. Marcus caught fragments of meaning, words that translated in his mind as intruder, violation, and something that sounded like payment. The leader raised a hand, and silence fell immediately. "The ancient laws are clear. Those who enter the between uninvited must pay a price or accept a task. You have seen us, Marcus Weatherby. You know our secret. This cannot be undone." Marcus's mind reeled. How did this creature know his name? He hadn't spoken it. But then again, nothing about this situation followed any rules he understood. "What kind of task?" he managed to ask. The creature's eyes seemed to glow brighter. "Ah, good. You do not argue or deny. You accept what you see before you. This makes things simpler." It walked closer, and Marcus could see intricate tattoos or markings on its skin that seemed to shift and move in the pulsing light. "Something has been taken from us. Something precious that we cannot retrieve ourselves without great risk. You will return it to us, and in exchange, we will let you leave this place with your memory intact and your life unchanged." "And if I refuse?" Marcus heard himself ask, though he knew it was foolish to challenge them. The creature smiled, and Marcus wished it hadn't. Its teeth were too sharp, too many. "Then you will stay here, in the between, until time loses all meaning and you forget you were ever anything but another tree in this eternal forest. Your wife will search for you. She will grieve. And eventually, she will move on, never knowing that you stand just beyond the veil, aware but unable to return." The threat was delivered in the same musical, almost pleasant tone, which somehow made it more terrifying. Marcus thought of Sarah, of their life together, of everything he would lose. "I'll do it," he said quickly. "I'll help you. Just tell me what you need." The creature nodded, as if this had been the expected answer all along. 3 days ago, a human child wandered near the edge of our territory. She carried with her a small object, a locket containing pictures of her family. One of our young ones, foolish and curious, took it. The child cried for hours before her parents found her. The locket is precious to her, irreplaceable. Our young one has since learned the error of taking what belongs to another, but the damage is done. Marcus frowned, confused. "You want me to return a stolen locket to a child? That's the task." "The task is more complex than you understand," the creature replied. "The locket has been touched by our magic, held in the between for 3 days. If it is simply returned, it will bring misfortune to the child and her family. It must be cleansed in the waters of the old spring, dried in sunlight that has never touched shadow, and placed where the child will find it while believing it was simply lost, not stolen. This must be done before the next full moon, which rises tomorrow night." The creature reached into a pouch at its side and produced the locket, holding it delicately between 2 tiny fingers. Even in the strange light of the between, Marcus could see it was a simple silver oval, the kind sold in department stores for $20. But when the creature placed it in his palm, it felt heavy, weighted with more than just metal. The surface was warm and seemed to pulse with a faint heartbeat. "The old spring lies at the heart of this forest," the creature explained, its voice taking on a more serious tone. "But the path is guarded by things that do not answer to us, things that were here long before our kind claimed the between. You must be careful, clever, and above all, you must not lose the locket. If it falls into the wrong hands or wrong elements, the curse will grow stronger, and the child's fate will be sealed in tragedy." Marcus closed his fist around the locket, feeling its strange warmth seep into his skin. "How do I find this spring?" The creature gestured to one of its companions, a smaller being with skin like silver birch bark and hair that looked like autumn leaves. This one approached cautiously, carrying what appeared to be a map drawn on a piece of bark. The lines glowed faintly, showing pathways through the forest that Marcus was certain didn't exist on any normal map. "Follow the moon path," the first creature instructed, pointing to a glowing line on the bark map. "It will lead you through the Whispering Grove, past the Stones of Echo, and down to the spring. But heed this warning, the things you will encounter will test you. They will offer you shortcuts, bargains, easy paths. Accept none of them. The old spring must be reached through honest effort, or the cleansing will fail." The smaller creature handed Marcus the bark map, and he studied it carefully. The path looked straightforward enough, a winding trail marked with symbols he somehow understood despite never having seen them before. Distance was impossible to judge on this map, but instinct told him it would take most of the night to reach the spring. "What about time?" Marcus asked, thinking of Sarah, of his phone showing over 4 hours had passed when it felt like minutes. "How does time work here?" The creature's expression became almost sympathetic. "Time in the between moves to its own rhythm. Sometimes faster than your world, sometimes slower. The task must be completed before the full moon rises tomorrow night in your world. Here, you will have what time you need, no more, no less. Trust in the path." Marcus wanted to ask more questions, to demand clearer answers, but the creatures were already backing away, fading into the shadows beneath the glowing trees. Only the leader remained, watching him with those two large eyes. "One more thing, Marcus Weatherby," it said softly. "You have seen us now. You have walked in the between. Even after you return to your world, you will never be quite the same. You will see things others cannot, hear whispers on the wind, notice the small magics that happen in the corners of the world. This is not a curse, but it is a burden. Choose carefully what you do with this knowledge." Then it too was gone, vanishing like mist in sunlight, and Marcus stood alone in the clearing with a magic locket in one hand and a bark map in the other. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and started walking. The moon path, as the creature had called it, began at the far side of the clearing. As Marcus approached, the ground beneath his feet began to glow with a soft silver light, marking the way forward. The moment he stepped onto it, the light intensified, forming a clear trail through the forest. The Whispering Grove announced itself long before Marcus reached it. He heard the voices first, thousands of them, speaking in languages he didn't know, telling stories he couldn't quite grasp. The trees here had faces carved into their bark, mouths moving constantly, whispering secrets to anyone who would listen. Marcus kept his eyes on the moon path, remembering the warning about shortcuts and bargains. The voices grew louder, more insistent. Some whispered his name, others told him about faster routes, easier ways. One tree, its face ancient and knowing, promised to send him straight to the spring if he would only answer one simple question. He pressed forward, ignoring them all. The locket in his pocket seemed to grow warmer, as if approving of his choices. The voices eventually faded behind him, and Marcus emerged from the grove into a section of forest where the trees grew so close together they formed a natural tunnel. The Stones of Echo came next, massive boulders arranged in a spiral pattern. As Marcus entered the spiral, his footsteps began to echo, but the sounds that came back weren't quite right. They sounded like different footsteps, heavier, or lighter, or accompanied by breathing that wasn't his own. The echoes built on each other, creating a cacophony that made it hard to think. Marcus covered his ears and ran, following the moon path as it wound between the stones. The echoes chased him, growing louder and more distorted, until they sounded like screams and laughter and crying all mixed together. Just when he thought his mind might break from the noise, he burst out of the spiral and into blessed silence. He stood there, panting, his heart racing. The bark map in his hand showed he was close now. The old spring was just ahead, down a steep slope and through one final obstacle the map labeled only as the Guardian. Marcus approached the slope carefully. The moon path led downward at a sharp angle, through rocks and roots that seemed designed to trip unwary travelers. He could hear water now, a gentle burbling that grew louder as he descended. At the bottom of the slope, the forest opened into a small grotto. The old spring bubbled up from the ground in the center of the grotto, its waters crystal clear and glowing with the same soft light as the moon path. The pool it formed was perhaps 6 feet across, surrounded by smooth stones worn by centuries of water. Ancient symbols were carved into these stones, their meaning lost to time but their power still palpable. Between Marcus and the spring stood the Guardian. The Guardian was unlike anything Marcus had encountered in the between. It stood 7 feet tall, its body composed of what looked like living stone wrapped in flowing water. Where its face should have been, there was instead a smooth surface that reflected everything around it like a perfect mirror. It moved without sound, its watery limbs flowing and reforming with each motion, and it blocked the path to the old spring completely. Marcus stopped, his hand instinctively going to the locket in his pocket. The Guardian tilted its head, studying him with that featureless mirror face. When it spoke, its voice was the sound of water rushing over rocks, deep and ancient. "Another seeker comes to the old spring," it said, each word resonating in Marcus's chest. "State your purpose, and I will judge if you may pass." Marcus swallowed hard, choosing his words carefully. "I carry a locket that has been touched by the magic of the between. I need to cleanse it in the spring's waters so it can be safely returned to a child without bringing harm." The Guardian was silent for a long moment, its mirror face reflecting Marcus's anxious expression back at him. "The waters of the old spring are not given freely. They have power beyond simple cleansing. To use them, you must prove yourself worthy. Answer me this, what is the weight of a broken promise?" Marcus frowned, thinking. Was this a riddle? A test of wisdom? He thought about his own life, about promises he had made and kept, and the few he had broken. "The weight of a broken promise," he said slowly, "is measured not in the words spoken, but in the trust destroyed. It weighs heaviest on the one who broke it, but its effects ripple outward, touching everyone connected to that promise." The Guardian's form rippled, water flowing through stone in patterns that might have been approval. "You understand that actions have consequences. Good. Second question. What is the value of a thing that cannot be replaced?" This one was easier. Marcus touched the locket in his pocket, feeling its warmth. "Its value is infinite, because it holds meaning beyond any price. It might be worthless to others, but to the one who cherishes it, it contains memories, love, connection. Those things cannot be bought or remade." The Guardian stepped aside, its watery limbs parting to create a clear path to the spring. "You may pass, Marcus Weatherby. Cleanse the locket well, for the child who waits for it has cried herself to sleep 3 nights running. Her heart knows it will return, even if her mind does not believe." Marcus approached the spring reverently, pulling the locket from his pocket. As he knelt beside the water, he could see strange shapes moving beneath the surface, though whether they were fish or something else entirely, he couldn't tell. He lowered the locket into the water, and the moment it touched the surface, the spring began to glow brighter. The water bubbled and churned around the locket, and Marcus could see dark wisps rising from it like smoke, dissipating into the air. The cleansing took several minutes, during which Marcus watched in fascination as the locket transformed. The tarnish he hadn't noticed before disappeared, and the metal began to shine with a pure silver light. When the water settled, Marcus lifted the locket out. It was completely dry, despite having been submerged, and it no longer carried that strange warmth and pulse. It felt normal now, just a simple piece of jewelry, but somehow he knew it was safe. "The cleansing is complete," the Guardian announced. "But your task is not finished. The locket must be dried in sunlight that has never touched shadow. You will find such light at the crown of the forest, where the oldest tree stands above all others. Go now, and do not delay. The moon will rise soon." Marcus stood, clutching the locket carefully. The Guardian pointed with one flowing limb, and Marcus saw that the moon path now led upward, through the grotto and toward what must be the crown of the forest. He began to climb, his muscles aching from the night's journey, his mind spinning with everything he had experienced. The path grew steeper, winding through increasingly ancient trees until Marcus emerged onto a plateau. Here, a single tree dominated the landscape, its trunk so massive that 10 men holding hands couldn't encircle it. Its branches spread out like a canopy over the entire plateau, but at the very top, there was an opening where pure sunlight streamed through. The strange thing was, it had been night when Marcus entered the between. But here, in this impossible place, sunlight poured down as bright as noon. Marcus climbed the tree, finding handholds and footholds that seemed placed precisely for that purpose. Higher and higher he went, until he reached the opening in the canopy. The sunlight here was different from any he had known. It felt ancient, pure, untainted by anything earthly. Marcus held the locket up, and the light caught it, making it sparkle and gleam. He held it there for what might have been seconds or hours, letting the light soak into every curve and crevice. When he lowered the locket, he knew instinctively that this part of the task was complete. Now came the hardest part, returning to his world and placing the locket where the child would find it, making her believe it had simply been lost. Marcus climbed down from the tree and found the moon path waiting for him, but this time it led in a different direction. He followed it through the forest, and gradually the strange glowing trees gave way to normal ones. The humming sound faded, replaced by familiar night sounds of crickets and owls. The air lost its thick, magical quality and became the simple autumn air of home. The moon path led him to the edge of the between, to the mushroom circle he had found hours ago. But now, instead of leading him back through the thorn tunnel, it circled the ring and continued toward a part of the forest he recognized. He was perhaps a mile from his property, in a section where families sometimes came to hike. Marcus checked his phone. The battery was at 3%, but he had signal again. Messages from Sarah flooded in, increasing in worry with each one. The time showed 11:30 p.m. 7 hours had passed in his world, though it had felt like days in the between. He knew where to go. There was a playground near the hiking trail, with swings and a slide. As Marcus approached, he saw something that confirmed he was on the right path. On one of the swings, there was a small teddy bear, worn from love and clearly cherished. A child's jacket hung on the swing's chain. This was her special place. Marcus placed the locket carefully on the swing seat, positioning it so the morning sun would catch it and make it sparkle. The child would come here, probably tomorrow, seeking comfort in her favorite spot. She would find her treasure and believe it had simply slipped from her pocket during play. The moment Marcus set the locket down, he felt a shift in the air. A breeze picked up, carrying with it that chiming voice he had heard in the between. The task is complete. The debt is paid. Go home, Marcus Weatherby, and speak of this to no one who would not believe. Marcus turned and ran, his tired legs carrying him through the forest toward his farm. He emerged from the trees and saw his house blazing with lights. Sarah was on the porch, phone pressed to her ear, probably about to call the police. When she saw him, she dropped the phone and rushed down the steps. Marcus, where have you been? I've been terrified. What happened? He caught her in his arms, holding her tight, feeling the solid reality of her against him. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I got lost in the woods, following some animal tracks. My phone died, and I couldn't find my way back until now. It was the truth, in a way. Sarah pulled back, looking at his torn jacket and dirt-stained clothes. You're going to give me a heart attack one of these days. Promise me you won't do anything like that again. I promise, Marcus said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. They went inside, and Sarah heated up dinner while Marcus showered, washing away the dirt and leaves and the last physical traces of the between. But as the creature had warned, he was changed. When he looked out the window while eating, he could see things he had never noticed before. Small lights dancing in the garden, shadows that moved against the wind, a shimmer in the air where his world touched something else. The next morning, Marcus was drinking coffee when Sarah showed him a news story on her tablet. Look at this, she said. That little girl who lives down the road, Emma Chen, she lost her locket a few days ago. She was heartbroken. But she found it this morning at the playground. Her parents say it's a miracle. Marcus looked at the picture accompanying the story. A small girl with bright eyes and a radiant smile, holding up her locket like it was made of gold. In the background, he could see the swing where he had placed it, catching the morning sunlight exactly as he had hoped. That's wonderful, he said quietly. That night, when the full moon rose, Marcus stood behind his barn where the tiny footprints had first appeared. They were still there, preserved in the dried mud like a reminder. As he watched, a small figure emerged from the forest's edge, barely visible in the moonlight. It was the creature from the between, the leader who had set him on his task. It raised one tiny hand in what might have been a wave or a salute. Marcus raised his hand in return, and understanding passed between them. The debt was paid, but the connection remained. The creature disappeared back into the trees, and Marcus knew the footprints would be gone by morning, washed away by rain or blown away by wind. But he would remember. He would always remember the night he followed tiny footprints into the between and returned changed, carrying with him the knowledge that the world was far stranger and more magical than most people would ever know. And sometimes, on quiet nights, when the wind blew just right, Marcus would hear that chiming voice on the breeze, reminding him that some paths, once walked, leave marks on the soul that never fade.